Right, team, let's get this party started and try this bizzo again. Today I am going live with Chris from the Health and Fitness Guy, and we're going to be talking all things intermittent fasting. So I've had quite a lot of people ask about intermittent fasting. Hey, there he is. Let's bring him on the camera, hey? Bring Chris on the camera. Why can't I bring you on the camera? Chris, bring you on the camera. Yes, okay. All things intermittent fasting. And as usual, the materials, content, everything we talk about is recommended as general information only. Why did the guest decline the invitation? Approve, add him in. We're recommended as, oh my God, what's going on here? Let's see how we go. There he is. We're in the game. We're in the game, Chriso. So as I was saying, everything we talk about is recommended as general information only, not to be substituted as a professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The end. Let's do this. Sorry, I'm coming to you live from my car because I was actually going to go and sit in the park, but it's windy as all shit, and I didn't think we'd be able to hear anything.
Perfect. I'm in my garage and I've locked the dog up, so I'm good to go.
Not going to be attacked by the hound.
Hopefully not.
So today what I wanted to talk to you about was intermittent fasting. Now, I've had quite a lot of people ask about intermittent fasting. I've spoken about it in brief on my Instagram stories, but I think it's something that there's a lot of confusion around. I think people hear the word fasting and they freak out and they think that it needs to be like a 24-hour, 48-hour, 7-day, 14-day, 30-day fast. And people freak out. I think what people don't realize is that every single one of us fasts every single day for a period of time. Like if you sleep and don't get up in the middle of the night to eat, you're fasting.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of the easiest tools that you can implement to improve your health pretty quickly and easily. And there are lots of ways to go about doing it to get, to make it easy, but also to yield, the best results for yourself. And it does have a whole cascade of benefits that are now sort of being validated quite, across the board by lots of different scientific studies. And it's something that I do often, encourage my clients to do as one of the very first steps on really trying to get back into their health and wellness game.
So let's start with what is fasting and what are some of the benefits that people could see from fasting?
Yeah, sure. Look, as you said in the start, it can be right up to a 7-day fast or something like that, but that is not something that I ever recommend at all. I have done a couple of 2 or 3-day fasts, and that is a bit tough, and even that I don't recommend. Even a full day, 24-hour fast, although fantastic, would be something ideally to do once a month, once every couple of months, once a year, is not necessary. What you can do is look at something like a reduced eating window. So one of the most popular ways to do it at present is something like a 16 and 8. So for 16 hours, you fast, and then for 8 hours, you would consume your meal. So when you look at it, it's not actually that hard to do. So if you were to start eating at, say, 11 a.m. in the morning, big lunch, you try not to snack, and then you would then have a really big dinner. So 2 big meals, maybe a snack in between. So if you had your first meal at 11, you would stop eating at 7 at night. Go to bed, wake up, go through your morning routine, and then jump back into eating the next day at 11 o'clock. What I would suggest to a lot of people, and particularly females, is not to do it every single day. So to give yourself a break, to mix it up, and replenish at different times during the week. So if you were to do that, say Monday to Friday, for myself, I often find it too hard to eat breakfast when I'm getting the 3 kids ready for school and all that sort of stuff. So missing, the morning intake is fine, but on the weekends I do try to maybe eat a larger breakfast, particularly on a Sunday or something like that, and really sit down and enjoy it. So that's probably the easiest way to do it, is to look at something like that. But again, there's nothing set in stone. So you could potentially go, no way, I need breakfast, and that's completely fine. So you might then potentially eat first thing in the morning at 6:30, 7 a.m. and then your next meal might be at 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. And then again, that intermittent fasting period, you're having a 12-hour break between meals. Now, one of the key things that it's really trying to do is reset insulin sensitivity. So it's you're giving your body a break from producing insulin to counteract the effects of food, and in particularly carbohydrates. So one of the worst things you can actually do is snack. Even if it's great, healthy, awesome snacks, they're better than bad snacks. But still, that constant I need to snack every 2 hours, I need to eat every 4 hours because it boosts my metabolism. It actually doesn't. It actually ruins your metabolism. It ruins the hormone associated with hunger and increase in hunger. And intermittent fasting is really just trying to pull that pendulum back and stop all these mechanisms that are really just, from increased caloric intake affecting your health.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to give our digestive system a break as well. Like, our body has two states. It has, fight or flight or rest and digest, and they can't happen at the same time. So, we need to give our body that chance to rest and digest. We need to let our bodies have that chance to get our food in, digest it, but give it a fucking break. Like, if you keep assaulting it with food every 2 hours, it has got no chance to do any of the other stuff it needs to do. There's no cell autophagy. There's none of that, and autophagy is cleanup. It's when our body's actually So, team, we're having a bit of trouble connecting today. I'm not sure what is going on, but hopefully we can get this happening. We'll give it one more crack and see what happens, hey? There's Chris. Bring him onto the camera.
Hello, we're back.
Hello. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I don't even know what's going on. Anyway, we are back. We are back.
Okay.
So, I was just saying, you were talking about insulin responses and carbohydrates, and I was just saying that, what are your thoughts on, I think, keto is the new black at the moment. Everybody wants to do keto, but a lot of the time it's really restrictive for people. They find that it's socially isolating, and they also find that they're kind of white knuckling their way through that first month of doing keto. Whereas I think if you're pretty strategic about it, you can probably get a lot of the benefits of ketosis via intermittent fasting. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. One of the benefits of ketosis is that it does create, cellular autophagy in a way, because you're reducing your insulin load and your insulin growth-like factor in response to taking on board lots of carbohydrates. So what that means is more carbohydrates you take in. If you just imagine the cellular turnover is kind of like a wheel. So the more calories you consume, the more carbohydrates, that wheel just speeds up. And what that means is your cells, are constantly recreating by that increased caloric load. When we go into something like ketosis, or particularly intermittent fasting, that cellular turnover and creation of new cells actually starts to slow down. And when that sort of stops, that is what essentially cellular autophagy is, which is what you mentioned before. So instead of creating new cells, what that means is it goes around to all the cells in your body, kind of like this original painting I've got on my background here. And what that does is that actually tidies up the cell. So it comes across and goes, hey, this cell here is defunct. So instead of recreating it and just continually recreating that defunct cell, which if you think about that defunct cell being recreated 1,000 times, that's eventually going to morph that and change it into something that is not that healthy for you. But if we can then get that cell to almost, self-manage, self-correct any defuncts in that cell, then that is cellular autophagy, and that's going to help increase your health and wellness, and also things like your health span, etc. So it's a massively easy and important way to have a profound change in your health. And you're right, you don't have to do ketosis to do it. It is easier to come into something like intermittent fasting from a lower carbohydrate background. If you come in from high carbohydrate background and you then cut off everything, that steep drop and decline in carbs is really going to hurt. But if you come in from a slightly lower height, then that decline into the restriction is going to be a lot easier. And also, if you're coming from a lower carbohydrate background and then you go into that intermittent fasting, you're going to again generate one of the benefits of something like ketosis, which is increased levels of beta oxidation, which is the use of ketones as an energy source. So if we can generate that, then you're going to get some of the benefits of the ketones without actually going full ketogenic diet. And that's one of the easiest, most efficient ways. You're not going to have, you can still go out and have your great dinner and your glass of wine and all that sort of stuff. But you just strategically implement 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, whatever it is, of that reduced carbohydrate window.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think, like what you said, so we're seeing, some cell autophagy, which is cell cleanup and cell regeneration in that process. We're allowing our bodies to actually rest and our digestive system to take a break in between it. It's going to help to stabilize blood glucose levels by really helping to stabilize that insulin response we're having to things. And it's also going to turn on that using fat for fuel, because we're not constantly just jamming fuel into our body, which our body is going to preferentially use. Like if you're just keep putting food in, your body will go, well, that's the easiest thing for me to use for fuel, so I'll use that. I won't tap into what's sitting on your ass.
Exactly right. Yes, that's right. And when you start to just alter that mechanism of switching from carbohydrate dependence to, the more of that beta oxidation, so the breakdown of fats into ketones and then using them in your energy cycles, you will, even bypass to a degree some of that just, your natural levels of, carbohydrates and glucose in your blood and in your muscles will become a lot more efficiently used. And that's, I think the word here is efficient, and that's what everything is about. It's about efficiency. So your training should make you efficient for life. Your nutrition should make your body efficient in how it uses and how it stores energy. And when you're efficient, you're lean and you're fit and you're healthy. And lean doesn't mean 5% body fat. It means lean for you, and it means efficient for you and your body shape. And it's just an easy way to affect that and get that efficiency working better. If we take a step back again and look at this from an evolutionary perspective, there were times, that, the ancestors way back in the day, evolved to adapt to situations and timeframes where we did have reduced caloric load. As a mammal and an organism with high caloric thinking, we have naturally evolved to be able to still cognitively function with decreased caloric intake. And that is hugely important for the human species. So what you'll find with intermittent fasting, and what it actually does, is that primary cellular autophagy actually occurs in the brain first. And it really does heighten your awareness and, cognitive function, etc. over time as you become more adjusted to it, and you don't freak out like the first couple of times after, 30 years of eating food whenever you want, as easy as it is, you know, you start to adapt to it and your body actually really enjoys it, and cognitively you really benefit from it. And one of the things why is what you just touched on before, is that reduced blood sugar load. So instead of kind of having this constant yo-yo of your blood sugars up and down, we're just reducing the height and the depth of those drops and those highs. So mentally and cognitively, you're actually a lot more stable. And what that does is you feel better, you feel sharper, you're not kind of craving the next hit and then crashing, which can also, again, going back to the original discussion we had about fight or flight response, that constant up, we're getting up, we need, and then we have that big fuel source, we go up, and then we crash, and that causes a big stress response. Our body then reduces some cortisol and adrenaline, and then to really utilize that, that also stimulates an increased desire to get that next hit. So then we take, I need, you know, no fuel source. So we take in more, and that up and down stimulates a stress response. It heightens, you know, the blood sugar imbalances, and that affects the brain. So from an evolutionary point of view, we've worked out over millions of years of evolution how to negate that by, you know, the simple mechanisms that we have in place to alter energy sources from carbohydrate to fat, and increase the beta oxidation, and have that your brain sort of functioning at its optimal, even with that calorie, you know, reduction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing to probably be aware of is that food quality is important. Like, there is no point eating a bullshit junk food diet and incorporating intermittent fasting and expecting grand results. Like, you will probably see some changes just because you're not eating for fucking 20 hours of a day, but you're not going to get the health outcomes that you really could get, or the mental and cognitive function outcomes, if you were actually eating a real food-based diet. So I think for the general punter who's coming from a standard Australian or a standard American diet where it is carbs, we're having carbs for breakfast, we're having carbs for lunch, we're having carbs with some more carbs for dinner, and we're having 75 different carb snacks in between, because when you're eating carbohydrates as your primary fuel source, it's like putting kindling on a fire. So yes, the fire will go, but you got to keep putting kindling on, otherwise the fire's going to burn out. So that's what carbohydrates are in our body, is they're like putting kindling on a fire, which is why when you're jacked up on processed carbs all the time, you get hangry. You've got to eat every 2 to 3 hours because you lose your shit, and you actually convince yourself that you are going to go into some sort of diabetic coma if you don't. Whereas when you actually start to incorporate more good, healthy fats for fuel and really just pare down those carbohydrates and really focus on real food carbohydrates, you're actually putting a log on that fire. So that log is fat. So your body, it takes a little bit longer for your body to click over into burning that log as a fuel source. But you whack a log on that fire, you don't have to put another log on there for like 5 or 6 or 7 hours. And you're fine. You have this really great steady burn. You're not having peaks and troughs. You're not having fluctuations. So I think what people need to remember is that it's not a case of just don't eat for 16 hours and then eat whatever sort of shit you want to in 8 hours. Because sure, that's technically intermittent fasting, but eating bacon fried in butter with a side of cheese is also technically keto. It's just not that great for you. So I think if you want to get the most benefits out of, you really want to focus on food quality as well. So if somebody, so who would not be a candidate for doing intermittent fasting? So who would you not suggest this to?
Look, if you have, you know, a medical disorder, if you're pregnant, if you're around the menstrual cycle, so within that sort of, you know, 2 or 3 days preceding the menstrual cycle and during the cycle itself, and 2 or 3 days afterwards, I would sort of say, you know, be very wary or seek medical advice to really talk you through that. And they're kind of the couple of main ones there. I think everybody can benefit from some form of intermittent fasting, but you know, you might not go 16 and 8. You might just kind of start to push breakfast back half an hour, and do like that. I'd say for guys doing, you know, or girls, guys just generic term there, doing massive strength training, often, there's one energy source or pathway where, yeah, you can do it fast and get some benefits. And then the other way where you do eat the fuel prior and afterwards, and you also get the benefits. So you can mix it up to a degree. I just wouldn't train heavy every single day fasted, and that's sort of something through there. But generally speaking, it's such an easy tool to use that almost anybody can do it, apart from severe medical conditions, those pregnant or breastfeeding, particularly in those first few months, and then those who who have that horrible sort of menstrual issues that can occur.
Yeah. And I think, like you said earlier, it's something that if you are coming from, that standard Australian way of eating where we've been told for such a long time, you need to eat every, 3 hours and all the rest of it. And you're used to doing that, and you're used to eating a fairly highly processed carbohydrate rich diet, it's probably a good idea because naturally you have dinner at 7 o'clock at night and you don't have breakfast till 7 o'clock in the morning. You've just fasted for 12 hours. You didn't have to try. Exactly. You're good. So maybe just try pushing breakfast out until 8 o'clock in the morning and see how that feels. Push it out till 9 o'clock and see how that feels, because you don't want to be white knuckling your way through this process. It needs to be something that, like for me, I don't have breakfast anymore. And it used to be something that I always had. For me, I'm okay not to eat breakfast, and it will get to some days 10 o'clock, some days 11 o'clock, some days 12 o'clock. But I don't look at the clock. I don't watch now for when can I have food. I'm like, oh, I'll just eat when I'm hungry. And at some point my body's going to say, yeah, you know what? Time to eat some food. And I'll go, yeah, cool. Okay. It's 11 o'clock. That's nice. Or it might be 9 o'clock and my body's going, I'm hungry. I'm like, cool. Okay. I'm going to eat now. And it needs to be something that you can get to that place of intuitive eating and work out what works for you. I think as well, if you are finding that you cannot get between that first meal of the day, which might be at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, whatever, and then your dinner meal, you really need to have a look at what's in that meal, don't you? Like there needs to be enough protein in there, and there needs to be enough good, healthy fats in there.
Yeah, definitely. And I would probably start with, protein, and take a step back to what you're saying about, eating that, breakfast at 7, that's completely fine. And then eating dinner at 7, that's fine. If that 12-hour stretch between is too much, which it is, because we're working, we're stressed, all that sort of stuff, then just have your lunch at, that 5-hour window at 12, but don't snack in between. Have a cup of tea, or a black coffee, or just water, and don't go for the healthy, cool, awesome snack in between, even if it is a fantastic one. Just give your digestive system a break between those 3 meals, and that's still a great way to do it. But if you are going to do it, and why you can do that quite well, is because you're coming from this whole food background. So you're going into it and you've had your fiber and you've had your micronutrient content, you've had your carbohydrate content. Carbs aren't bad. It's just the type of carbs that are bad. Just like, so coming from all of that healthy food background with the fats, with the proteins, you're going to be able to, your body will naturally, coach you through it, especially if you're starting to really, pay attention and be mindful and respect your body and how it adjusts to these situations. So without trying to shift the conversation to what I do, within the app that I have is a nutrition formula. And in that, you can actually key in your data and it'll come up with a macronutrient plan, and that will give you, your fats. It'll give you your carbohydrate intake based on your training intake. And it also means that you can select a moderate, like a light, a medium restrictive, and then a heavy restrictive intermittent fasting protocol. And it'll say on your intermittent fasting days, eat this much. And what is symbiotic between those two is the protein. Yeah. So your protein intake will stay the same on the days that you train and on your regular eating days and on your fasting days. And that there is really important to maintain that level of protein from whatever your protein source is. That's fine. Just make it a good one, because that is really going to help with not only giving you the protein, which will help keep you full for longer, but it's also going to help with the building and maintenance of muscle tissue, and that's really important. So on the intermittent fasting days and the non-intermittent fasting days, you can alter some of those macros, but just make sure your protein stays the same.
Yeah, absolutely. So to be clear for people who are fasting, what could they include in their morning where they are fasted? Because I say I would call not eating until 11, 12, whatever o'clock fasting, but I do have coffee with full fat coconut milk in it in the morning, and I have collagen, which technically breaks my fast, but it's
Yeah.
also a caloric deficit still. And I still feel like I mean, that gives me good satiety, but I also don't feel like that derails every element of fasting benefit that I could get. It's definitely not a technical fast. And some mornings I would just do a bulletproof coffee or a black coffee and really kind of more tightly fast. But for the
Yeah.
most part, I'm doing coffee
Yeah.
with fat and collagen.
Yeah, and this is somewhat of a contentious area. The full diehard fast are going to go, Shannon, you're not fasting, you're evil.
Mm.
But everyone else is kind of going to go, well, you're ridiculous, you're not eating. So
Yeah.
look, technically, if it's anything other than water, it's not fasting. But,
Yeah.
we've got to look at this realistically, and having a
Mm.
black coffee with a little bit of fat, and that coconut milk and that coconut fat, again, the
Mm.
acids in that do help, nourish some of the digestive tract enzymes, etc. So that's it's not that big a deal. And yes, you
Yeah.
are already in a lower caloric intake position. And intermittent fasting, again, can just be that you're reducing your caloric load for the day. And you might spread
Mm.
that caloric load over 2 to 3 meals. So instead of having 2,000 calories, you might have 1,000 calories, and you might spread that 1,000 calories 3 meals over the course of the day. And that is still okay, because we're reducing the insulin load, we're reducing the digestive load, etc.
Oh,
So,
I'm still getting in 2,500
yeah.
calories, bro. I have got no interest in
And that's
reducing
the
my
thing.
caloric load.
I think the most important thing here is that people need to realize that you've got to do the best that you can. You've got to implement it in a way that you can implement it. And the nose,
Mm.
I'm not a Navy SEAL, so I'm not going to get up at 4 and crush life and be this awesome, because it's not me. If somebody yells at me, I'll start crying, sort of thing. I'm not that kind of. So what I'm saying to people is, you don't need to kind of go, well, I'm not eating for 24 hours or 4 hours or 6 hours. You might just get up and just start with, you know what, I'm not going to eat rice bubbles, and I'm going to have a
Mm.
black coffee with a little bit of cream, or I'm just going to have my latte.
Mm.
With my regular milk. I'm going to get full fat milk, and I'm not going to get the sugar, and I'm not going to
Mm.
get the other add-on. And just start with that and kind of be proud that
Yeah.
you've made that change, that in, and then kind of come back to it and go, I'm having that coffee at 6:30 a.m. Well, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to push that coffee back to 7:30 a.m. Hey, that's an extra hour. You stopped eating at 7:30 the night before, so now you've gone to 13 hours. Well done. That's a big win. And
Yep.
take it like that, like little tiny action steps, baby steps towards, crawling to walking. Like, you've got
Yeah.
to be aware of it and implement it as best you can. So listen to all these different strategies, and then sit down on a Sunday with a glass of wine, cup of tea, whatever, and kind of go, well, how can I tackle this week? And then come
Mm.
up with a plan. Don't just wake up and go, well, I'm not eating for the next 4 hours, because that's going to be bad. Go
Yeah.
on a Sunday, well, I'm not going to eat on Tuesday, Thursday morning. So on the Monday night, making sure that you have somewhat of a larger meal with the protein and with the fats, like a roast lamb with vegetables, with some
Mm.
oil, and you're going to be good for the next day. Don't
Yeah.
kind of, just have your regular, burritos, and then wake up the next morning and think that, going for that extra 6 hours not in is going to be okay. Come up with
Mm.
a plan on the Sunday, implement it during the week, do the best you can, and just work towards just, one little improvement every couple of weeks. And that is the
Yeah.
best way to make it work.
And it depends on people's goals too, doesn't it? Like if you are, borderline type 2 diabetic, you really need to implement some pretty strict health strategies to get that shit back under wraps. And it might look like some pretty strict fasting with some pretty strict nutrition protocols around that. It might look like keto. It might look like whatever. If you're just the general punter who wants to drop a couple of kilos before your Bali holiday, it might be a bit more relaxed than that. It might be in a way that, you know, you can just get up in the morning and have your coffee or whatever, do your fasted training if you're going to go and, you know, do a bit of sprint training or whatever, do a bit of fasted cardio, and then have your first meal at 10:30 or 11 or whenever it is that your body is going, I'm so fucking hungry, and just try not to do those snacking in between. You're naturally going to get some really great probably fat loss benefits in there, but you're also going to get some of those other great fasting benefits just by not assaulting your body constantly with food all day.
Yeah, exactly. By giving it a break. And you know, probably to sort of almost summarize what we both just said then was, you know, giving yourself a bit of compassion to sort of get healthy. And compassion is empathy with a plan. And that's how I explain it to people. It's like, yeah, give yourself a bit of self-love and direct that with a plan, and work on that, you know, major health illness, type 2 diabetes, or, you know, get your rig to where you want it to be before Bali. But, you know, don't crush yourself with like this, you know, die-hard, you know, 4-week shredded, you know, bikini sort of thing. It's like, you know, go into it, you know, I'm just going to get a bit healthier. You know, there's the empathy, and here's my plan. I'm going to reduce. I'm going to add this in, and I'm going to try and stick to that, and I'm going to do it in little baby steps. And yeah, you will get results pretty quickly if you stick with it. Anything will work if you stick with it. So just come up with a plan that you can stick to that integrates some of this information that you can then do and stick with it, and you'll be good to go.
Yeah, and I think never let perfect get in the way of good. Make the best choices you can at the time. Incorporate some Primal Authentic's training into your life because it's very efficient and you don't have to leave your house. And I was going to say something else and I can't even remember what it was.
Get the Fed and Fit in 21 there.
No, it wasn't that. It wasn't that. It was something else. But I can't even remember what it was. Anyway, I'm sure it'll come to me. Yeah. So it was about creating habits that can actually become a lifestyle, which I think is why diets don't work, because a lemon detox diet or a 21-day fucking 8-week challenge or whatever it is, it's a diet and it's not a long-term sustainable goal. So yes, you might have weight loss or fat loss or whatever it is in that period of time because you're doing whatever mental thing that it is you're doing. But after that, it's all coming back on plus some GST, and it's not a sustainable lifestyle. So intermittent fasting isn't just a let's get shredded for Bali or, you know, let's just get rid of this pre-diabetic situation. It's about creating something that can actually be a lifestyle. Like, it's probably pretty easy for the general punter to incorporate 3 days of intermittent fasting and be strategic about it and work out when it is that you want to go out for brekkie with your friends or your family or make pancakes with the kids on the weekend or whatever it is. But you know what? There's probably some mornings where you've got early meetings or you've got shit to get done, and breakfast is actually just something that's going to take up a lot of time. So those days, you know, whether it's 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, whatever a week, just work out how you incorporate that into your life so that you're not constantly on this blood sugar roller coaster, and you can make it a sustainable lifestyle change so that over the next year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, you're getting all of these little incremental health benefits along the way that aren't meaning that you're flogging yourself in the gym for 4 hours every day or white knuckling your way through fucking steamed chicken and steamed broccoli because you think that's what you got to do to, you know, shred for stereo.
Exactly right. And that's it. Just, couldn't have said it better.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. So if anyone does have particular questions about intermittent fasting or ketosis, or you need help with your nutrition or your training, I will pop the links below for you to head over to Chris. He does personalized coaching and he is 100% the best coach I know. So If you
Thank
need
you.
his help, head on over. You can tell from our conversation that he is not super extreme. He's not going to make you do anything fucking ridiculous. He's going to help you incorporate stuff into your life that can become a lifestyle. And yeah, you too can have a dad bod like Chriso.
Thank you.
All right, buddy. I'll talk to you soon.
Right.